Good morning, I'm Jim Scott, and this is Insight. My guest this week is someone who's been on the show several times over the last couple of years while he served as police chief, but he's departing that position. Glens Falls Police Chief Will Valenza, welcome back.
Thanks, Jim. Good to be here.
You announced you first informed the City Board of Public Safety you plan to retire at the end of the year. You will have 20 years of service in. What prompted you to make that decision? You've only been chief for about 3.5 years.
You know, I've always been one to say that I'd probably do about 20 years. In law enforcement, in most cases, we're very fortunate to be able to do 20 years in this job and retire. And, that's a whole argument that a lot of people like to try and make. But I think police officers earn that right. And I'd like to take advantage of it. I have a lot of opportunities that I'd like to explore. And my kids are going to be in college. And I want to be involved in that. And this is kind of a demanding job, and it's been great. It's been a very rewarding career, but I just feel it's time to move on.
You're also sergeant in the New York Army National Guard.
Yeah.
In fact, your wife's a longtime member of the Guard, who technically outranks you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
You have a son headed to West Point.
My oldest son is in West Point now. He just started his plebe year. We're really thrilled about that. I have a daughter who's down in basic training in South Carolina at the moment. She's 17, and I have another son who plans to join when he turns 17.
Wow, that's a very active family.
Yeah,
very active family.
We are, and that's that weighs a lot of my decision here. We're very active in the military, and we're very active in volunteer work. We do a lot of work with volunteer organizations in the military, with Special Olympics, with other organizations, and that's something I really enjoy. And it's something I want to do more of. I want to dedicate a little more time to volunteerism. So,
have you any concrete plans for after you leave in December? You can take maybe time off for a vacation.
I'd like to. Yeah, I'd like to take some time and just relax a little bit and do some catch up on some things. But I have some things in the works for. Some part-time work. I don't think I'm going to end up with a full-time job, but if I can just do some part-time things and keep myself going, that'll be great.
Some people, I've heard people say it, and I'm sure other people are thinking it, well, you're getting out while the getting's good because the city police department may be merged with the Warren County Sheriff's Office. The city's awaiting that report from the Division of Criminal Justice Services that's studying the pros and cons of all this. You have said that that's really not a factor.
I'm not going to say it's not a factor. It certainly weighs in my decision, but I do feel that if it led to that, which I really don't think it will, but even if it did lead to consolidation ever, it's going to take a long time. It's not something that's going to happen within the next few months or even next year or the year after that. It's a very, very long process. There's so much to be worked out. So I can't base my future on just that. But I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's a good idea, first of all. And I don't think when it comes down to it, there'll be support for it in the public. I haven't heard anybody in the public supporting it. And I've spoken to a lot of people.
It's over a century old.
It's 140 years old.
Yeah, my goodness.
And I look at it as this is a city. Glens Falls is a great city. And it's kind of in this position right now where there's so much potential. To take away its police department, it would make it the only city out of 62 cities in New York State that does not have a police department. You got to ask the city leaders, do you want to run a city that you're trying to do everything you can to make successful and not be in control of law enforcement in that city? I look now and crime is at historic lows in New York City. It's great. We're really enjoying a great time here as far as crime goes. Sometimes I look at it and say, oh my gosh, we better do something, because people say, well, if there's no crime, we don't need all these cops. And we don't have all these cops. We're a very modest police department. And we go out there, we do what we need to do, and we've done it very well. So the guys out there, they work really, really hard. And they're in tune with the city. They know the businesses. They know the residents. They know the people that we should know. And it's made us very successful, and I don't think that should change.
consolidating police dispatchers with Warren County happened on your watch a couple of years ago. Your assessment, how that's worked out?
There's good and bad with everything. No one wants to lose a piece of their department or their company or whatever you have. You always want to maintain control over every aspect of it. And so there's been some adjustments. We've had to make some adjustments. The Sheriff's Department has had to make some adjustments, and some of them work fine. Some of them, they're not what we want, and some of them are not what they want. But both agencies were handed this task, and I think we've done what we've had to do to make it work as best we can. And someone calls 911 or someone calls the police, we're going to show up. We're going to get there.
You've been credited, and rightly so, with making several progressive moves in the police department, especially in the detective division. There have been some high-profile departures. Chief Carey comes to mind, Chief Joe Bethel, Paul Fredeloso, Kevin Canine, Lloyd Schwartz. These were high-profile officers who decided to retire most of them when their 20 years were up. But you've been very successful in filling those big shoes.
I think that's one of the things I'll take away most is one of the things I'm proud of is that we were able to build up our detective unit. Because you got to remember, for a couple of years we were working where our detectives we were short-staffed in the detective unit, and they're purely reactionary. Someone has a burglary, they have to investigate that burglary. And it's a constant catch-up with these investigations. And while they were very successful, when you're short-staffed in a particular area, it doesn't give you the opportunity to be proactive. You can sit there and control everything that comes in as best you can. But what changes the dynamic of crime in a city is being proactive. And by going from 2 detectives or 3 at times to 4, it's given us the opportunity to investigate these major crimes when they happen, but also giving our detectives the opportunity to be proactive in drug enforcement and things like that. And we've been very successful, and it's made a real difference. So far this year, we've had 1 reported robbery. Last year, we had 3 reported robberies. You look back years ago. I look back at our old annual reports from 50 years ago when we had 20 stolen cars a year. We have maybe 1 stolen car a year now. So when I have a full complement of officers, it allows us to not just react to crime, it allows us to go out and look for it and prevent it before it happens. And before it causes a blight on the city.
Used to have this quality of life patrols downtown, especially weekend nights, when the bars were hopping.
Yeah.
That was partially funded by the state, wasn't it? Do you still do that?
We've gotten grants from the DA's office for that. We've got grants from different places for that, and grant money is not as easy as it is to come by as it used to be. It's a little bit of a challenge, and everybody's got tight budgets. The city's working on a very tight budget, and that's another thing that I'm proud to say we've always worked within our budget. So when we have available funds, we do that, and we don't necessarily need a grant to do that. If we have the manpower. We can put guys out in plain clothes that are out looking for those things. There's been a big change on South Street. If you take a walk down South Street now, as opposed to 5 years ago, as opposed to 20 years ago, there's a big difference down there. We've been successful in closing some of these bars down through our use of the nuisance law.
Bars
really
that were havens.
Yeah,
bars that
really
in some cases were havens for drug activity.
Yeah,
too.
They certainly were. Just a draw for gang activity and things like that, and it's a lot quieter down there now, thanks to police officers being on top of it and getting down there and being a visible presence on downtown. I used to get calls, people, I see these cops standing on South and Elm. That's because that's where they need to be, and the dynamic of South Street is changing. It's changing for the better. So we like to think we had a role in that, as well as the community coming together and developers investing. You take a street that's all cracked and you put new sidewalks in and new streets in and you beautify it. It has wide effects. So
big effect. You're right. Absolutely. Hear a lot about heroin trafficking. Talked to Jeff Murphy, the Washington County Sheriff, often about this. Bud York, Warren County Sheriff, they had a big forum in Washington County over that issue and that drug pipeline through Washington County over to Rutland. You hear so much about that. But you see a lot of that activity here in the city as well. And having additional detectives out there working with informants has kept the number of those arrests down. I don't see too many news releases dealing with that locally, but it's out there.
You don't. And when I look at the records, when I look at the numbers, I don't measure. I look at arrests, obviously, but you can't gauge what's going on by arrests. You have to gauge things by occurrences. And while it's great to say we made 10 arrests in this, and when we do make it a big arrest, if we do a search warrant or something like that, we do publicize it because the public needs to know that we are out there and we are working, we are looking for things. And, we're not going to do anything without input from the public. We need information from people giving us tips and things like that.
See something, say something.
Exactly. So that while it is a problem, and it is certainly on the rise over the last 10, when I came to Glens Falls 17 years ago, you didn't see heroin. It was a thing of the 60s and the 70s and stuff like that, But now it's made this big rise because of the change in the prescription drug issue that we had, which was the highlight a few years ago, which is still a problem. But being so successful with pharmacies and just people taking care of their prescription drugs because of the attention, it's turned people to heroin, to replace that with heroin. And that's what we're seeing now, and that's what we're dealing with. And it's always been around, but heroin's been more of one of those little back alley type kind of drugs. So
marijuana maybe more out in the open.
Yeah.
As a result, do we have a big pot problem locally?
How do
you feel about legalizing?
I certainly don't think we have any big problem. This is a great. Ask the average resident of the city of Glens Falls: do you feel safe in your neighborhood? Do you feel safe walking down the street? And I think they're going to say, yeah. Do we have houses that we've identified as problem houses that we're working on throughout the years? Absolutely. There's always going to be locations that we work on. You're going to have that anywhere. But is this a safe community? Absolutely.
How do you feel about legalizing pot like they've done in Colorado? Now they're running into problems there. The state can't grow enough, and they're charging such high taxes on it. People are going back to the black market.
Well, I'm not going to get into the politics of that.
I know.
How
do you personally feel about it? It's very popular. It's out there. Do you feel it's a gateway drug?
I do feel it's a gateway drug, and I don't want to get all cliche and all that, but I think that any time you use a substance that is mind altering and things like that, the potential is there for it to lead to something else. Even alcohol, perfectly legal, but people start socially using alcohol, and some people don't know when to stop, and that becomes an issue. It's still may still be alcohol, but it's abuse becomes a problem when it's readily available. And if you make something readily available, the potential for abuse is there. And I'm not advocating for it or against it. I'm not going to take an opinion on where we should go in the state, but the potential is there. And whether it can be regulated or not, that's going to be up to somebody.
Drunk driving arrests. Speaking of alcohol, were on the wane in the city. It still amazes me, even though I've seen hundreds of DWI arrests over there, arrests and tragically many resulting in deaths. They still continue to be a problem on our area roadways. Not so much in the city, though, according to your annual report. It sort of goes up and down.
It does. We're on a downswing now. It's not just Glens Falls. It's statewide, and part of that is education. Just better education. Another part of that is high-profile cases lead to stricter penalties and new laws. And we've gone through changes in law like Leandra's Law and things like that. And people are going to prison now for DWI offenses. And that's important. And in Glens Falls, I work with the Warren and Washington Victim Impact Panel. And what we're seeing here is we definitely are seeing a decline in DWI. And like I said, we look at the offenses. Like last year, I noticed that we had a low number of DWIs. We had like 86 DWIs, and it's dropping. So I looked at how many alcohol-related crashes we had. And in 2012, we had 24 alcohol-related crashes. And in 2013, we had 12 alcohol-related crashes. So you look at the occurrences and say, okay, it's not just because we're not arresting people, it's because the opportunity to arrest people is reduced. And that's the goal. I mean, if a success is when we don't make any arrests for DWI or underage drinking or things like that. So that's what we want to see. What we are seeing, though, the problem is that what's replacing DWI is cell phone use. People on their phones and texting while they're driving, it's killing kids. It's killing our kids because they are so that's their way of life is communicating on a phone. I like to say I have 3 kids. 3 teenagers. I can call them on the phone 10 times, I don't get an answer. I send them a text, I get an immediate response. And every time I say that, anybody who's a parent who's got teenagers, they know exactly what I'm talking about. So we've got to watch out for these kids. And that's why, Kate Hogan, our district attorney, we worked with her a couple of years ago, and she made the determination that anybody in Warren County that got a cell phone ticket as part of a plea would have to attend the victim impact panel. And we've changed the impact panel to include speakers that have been affected by a crash because of someone texting our cell phone. And it's making a difference. People walk into the impact panel and say, I don't know what I'm doing here. I got a cell phone ticket. And they walk out saying, thank you. It changed how I view this.
Wow, I didn't know that was included, and it's underway already. What do you tell men or women who come in want to become a member of the city police department?
Law enforcement is a career, and it's a hard life. Like I was saying, people retire when they hit 20 years, and we've earned that right. We've earned that benefit. And while I'm an administrator and I spend most of the time at my desk, you take the average police officer, and he goes to work for 20 years, and every day part of his uniform is a bulletproof vest. They get into fights. They have to mediate family problems. They deal with horrific accidents, and it takes a toll on people. They work hard. I spent my share working Christmas and Thanksgiving and working midnights for years. And these guys out there now, they do it every single day. So you need to, if you want a career in law enforcement, you need to accept that. You need to know that this is, you have to be dedicated, and you have to be prepared for that kind of lifestyle. It is very, very rewarding. I've dealt with so many horrible things, and I've seen the worst in people. But then, I look at my officers last year went in. These guys ran into a burning building, a fully engulfed burning building, and pulled 3 people out.
The bullpen fire.
The bullpen fire, yeah. They completely put their lives on line for somebody else, someone they didn't even know. And they were successful, and they saved lives. And that is that was rewarding for me. I can only imagine how these guys felt.
That's why we call them Glens finest.
That's absolutely right.
Well, we're almost out of time. We've covered a lot of territory. You want to take a vacation after you retire in December. Now, did I get that right? In December, you will have your 20 years in that
I'll
month?
officially retire in February, but I'll use my leave time.
Oh, I see. Accumulated leave time.
Yeah.
So,
part of that is I had originally been scheduled to reclassify in the military. I'm scheduled currently to go to school in January. And start a new path in the military. And I didn't think it was going to be fair to go away for 3 months and leave the department. So that kind of weighed on my decision to do this now. I've been away with the military weeks at a time here and there, but to go away for an extended period of time like that, I thought I need to take the opportunity to move on and let somebody else do this as their job, not just filling in. So,
okay, you're a sergeant,
staff sergeant.
Mm-hmm. How many years you been in the Guard?
Well, I was in the Guard in the 80s. I got out. I joined the Navy. Got out. So altogether, I've got in my 14th year now.
Oh, good for you. You're shooting for 20.
Yeah.
In military time.
Yeah.
You're still young.
2 full
fella.
careers, and
Good.
when it's time, I'll have 2 pensions.
I might add, and well earned, I might say.
Thanks.
And before I close out, I remember Chief Rick Carey telling me this. For anybody who's thinking of applying for Will's job after the end of the year, that civil service police chief's test is one of the hardest. I remember he told me he's ever taken. It's not easy.
The chief's test is very different from the sergeant's test, the police officer's test, the captain's test, in the fact that it's a progressive test. Whereas all those other tests, it's multiple choice, you have one answer, one correct answer. With the chief's test, there's a whole section where you have multiple answers. And depending on how you answer that, affects the next question. So you can dig yourself into a hole in a scenario, but you can dig yourself out of it. So it's a very odd test. And it was the first test I really sat down and really studied for.
Wow. Yeah, I remember him telling me they present you with so many scenarios.
Yeah,
it
was brutal. It was 2 months of waiting to see what, because I knew if I failed the test, it was going to be on the front page of the paper, and you'd be talking about it. So I wanted to make sure I passed it the first time.
Interim Chief Will Valenza will not be permanent. No, I didn't have to say that. You did it. Okay, so anybody thinking about doing that? Any closing remarks? I'll be talking to you, I'm sure, before you leave again.
I'm sure. I've had a great career. I'm still going to be here for a couple more months.
Sure.
I think that I love working with the public. One thing I want to say is that I've done a lot of volunteer work in the city, and every time I've reached out to people in the city here, whether it's residents or businesses, this city steps up when they're asked to, and that's just phenomenal. The business owners in this city are just they impress me every day. I always made it a habit of when a new business opens, go in and try and introduce myself and talk to these new business owners, and they give them my card so they had somebody to contact directly. And when we had the games come, we have the games coming, the Special Olympics games coming in the fall. People step up and they get out there and they participate and they donate prizes and they fundraise, and I think that's part of being one of the most rewarding parts of my career here is working with just the people in the city and the businesses, and I'm so proud to have been here.
I'm sure the feeling's mutual.
Thanks. I hope so.
Retiring but not retired yet. Glens Falls Police Chief Will Valenza, my guest on Insight this week. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Jim.
I'm Jim Scott.